Scotland's Climate Week, an initiative delivered annually by the Scottish Government since 2016 to celebrate action by national and local government, public sector, businesses, communities, organisations, families and individuals. This year we'll focus on travel and heating, two of the areas where change by individuals could collectively have the most impact, two areas, ironically, that the UK Prime Minister has reneged on in recent days. But I'm looking forward to visiting and learning more about how this is happening across Scotland, including with Keep Scotland Beautiful and Fountain Bridge Canalside Community Trust's heritage and climate action activities this week. I know that my colleagues across government are likewise taking part, and I would encourage members from across the chambers to do so as well. And the theme of this Climate Week debate today is climate emergency, ambition and action.
And I'm a geography teacher at Bonus Academy. And I wanted to get involved with the Climate Ready classrooms to work with a group of pupils to ensure that they are given the right information about how they can combat climate change and reduce their own carbon footprint. So what we learned doing the Climate Ready classrooms was how, as we as a whole school community, can make changes together to help combat climate change and reduce our carbon footprint, such as having meat-free days in the cafeteria and reducing our cup use in our own Hot Shots cafe. I think Climate Ready classroom workshops are really important because there is so much information just now in media and social media about climate change, and it's good to actually be able to tell the pupils the facts and relate it to things that they can actually do in their everyday lives.
The facts. Oh, the arrogance. So I thought I would just do a wee video, and initially it was going to be simply a wee video. But I've ended up with about 40 tabs open. I ended up in a bit of a rabbit hole, in all honesty, and I've found additional stuff to make a separate video on for something that sort of escaped my attention. But the first clip that I played was from Mary McCallan, who seems to be the SNP's new spokeswoman nowadays for all things climate change related. And I mean, it's one thing for them to sort of peddle their narrative to no end, you know, we're all a bit bored of that. But what kind of irritates me and has done for the longest time is the fact that there's never any pushback. All debate has been completely and utterly shut down. And as a result, they have carte blanche to do as they please, say as they please, and act in any manner that they please. There seems to be some sort of political consensus in the Scottish context and Parliament and whatnot. Everybody agrees that there's a climate crisis, etc., etc. Um, yeah, you don't even really need to get too far into it. You just need to look at their actions. And in all honesty, they don't really strike me as individuals who genuinely believe that. And all you need to do is look at the solutions that they have suggested. Of course, malicious as some of them sound, but I'm talking about post climate emergency or climate catastrophe. You know, a world that's equitable, power has been redistributed. They're always attacking capitalism. Things will be anti-racist, climate justice, and reparations, etc. Seems to me as if they're just trying to get rid of capitalism and implement something else in the back of it, so it kind of then leaves you with a little conundrum. Is it a case of fabricating a crisis from the get-go in order to push for change, societally speaking, or are they simply exploiting a crisis that already exists? Well, the only reason that they have managed to solidify the narrative that there really is a crisis at present is the fact, as I said, they've shut down most debate on the matter, and they just seem to manipulate data and point to natural disasters, emphasis on natural disasters, and fires that are man-made, and use that as proof, case closed examples of an increase in all, deadly events taking place because of climate change. Right. Here we have more than 2,600 pupils have enjoyed their first 2 days of Climate Action Week. So not content with, you know, implementing their green revolution right in front of our faces and kind of mugging us off in the process by making us believe that we have had a say in the matter, right, when we don't. They've kind of taken the power out of your hands anyway by suggesting it's a catastrophe/crisis. So it's kind of giving them, as I said, carte blanche to do as they please. But now they're just going after the children as if this is totally acceptable. And for most people, it seemingly is. But I just find the whole thing absolutely odious. Some of the things that I was just skimming through says here that you can get down a bit. that young people all over Scotland have been learning more about climate change and net zero thanks to our Climate Action Live Week lessons, or Week Live lessons, sorry. We began the week with a session hosted by author and illustrator Emma Reynolds, who I'll come on to in just a second. She was invited through our partnership with the Scottish Book Trust, where we are aiming to introduce environmental topics through the arts as well as STEM. She discussed the power of community and the importance of artists to transform society through examples from her latest book, 16 Youth Climate Activists, 16 Artists and Stories from Young People Shaping Change. Always an emphasis on the young, you know. On Tuesday, we were joined by the Highland Wildlife Park, who talked about nature's engineers being before author and illustrator, whatever, read Flooded, her beautiful book that introduces concepts about climate change and focuses on the importance of working together and building strong communities. Ugh, fucking hell, man. And then it says, Andrea Gabriel, our Eco Schools Scotland coordinator, said that Climate Action Week has gotten off to a fantastic start with around 2,700 young people taking part in our first 2 days of live lessons, with it being crucial that young people are informed and included in any discussions around climate change, as it is their future we are working to protect, and their voices will be fundamental and inspiring the positive action we must take. Yeah. So that's just you effectively giving yourself an excuse to politicize children and give the illusion, masquerade your politicization of them under the guise of you simply are trying to inform them and include them in proceedings. Yeah, it's called grooming. You're on the same website as well. It says here, climate action schools. And then they said that their climate action schools is a framework of education initiatives to support Scotland's educators, young people, and children to progress learning for sustainability and climate change education. Their action schools focus on 5 main outcomes: learning for sustainability, climate emergency, biodiversity, litter and pollution, and amplifying pupils' voices. Learning for sustainability. What a shock. Speak of the devil, there's the Sustainable Development Goals there. This is interesting, where they've got a section dedicated to climate ready classrooms. Yeah, find out more. Yeah, I think we will. Come down just to show we're dealing with really with these individuals, and it's not limited to them. You know, there's a few other organisations who are very similar who I can think of. WASDEC being one. They're sort of parent company as well. Can't remember the name. Education Scotland, etc. But it says here that climate ready classrooms for high schools is a 1 day accredited carbon literacy training course. And then they've got one for primary schools as well. It's a 1 day course that provides upper primary pupils with 3 workshops and associated activities. I fucking, what is a carbon literacy training course? Yeah, I wonder. I mean, they're just getting the facts, according to that teacher. Yeah, of course they are. Of course they are. Let's see. Carbon literacy. That's funny. The course aims to support young people to have an improved understanding of climate change science. Ah, here we go, the science, the climate science. Explore issues of climate justice and build global citizenship skills. Identify opportunities to reduce carbon emissions. Plan how to do this in act. Speak confidently as climate change ambassadors. Actively participate in Scotland's transition to a low carbon society. Yes, just remove plant food from our system. That's fine, you know. But again, it's remarkable how we keep going on and on and on about how imperative it is that Scotland reduces its emissions. So even if they all came to be tomorrow, it would not make a blind bit of difference, in all honesty. The UK as a whole is what, 1% of all emissions worldwide, right? And out of that 1%, what could we say is the case for Scotland? Don't really know off the top of my head. Let's just say, for argument's sake, maybe 3%, 0.3%, sorry. They wouldn't even make a, they don't tell you that part, do they? No. Because part of this narrative is to continuously blame us in particular, not limited to countries like ours, for apparently being responsible. We kickstarted the Industrial Revolution, you know? And in order to cement that narrative, they have to obviously leave out certain parts of history when they present it to the children, especially. Because we can't be talking about periods of history that were actually a lot warmer than any day we've seen in recent years, when they're not actually taking temperatures at the airports and whatnot. Anyway, I just want to know what carbon literacy means. Hopefully it'll tell us. This would be lovely. Before I move on to the videos, it's an awareness of the carbon dioxide costs and impacts of everyday activities, and the ability and motivation to reduce emissions on an individual and community and organisational basis. Today, over 70,000 individuals from over 5,000 plus organisations are carbon literate. Oh my god. This is just ridiculous fucking nonsense, really, in truth.
Climate Action Schools, our framework of education initiatives to help to support you on climate and environmental education. This short video will run through all the amazing programmes we have as part of Climate Action Schools. Our programmes cover key areas required by the Curriculum for Excellence and the Learning for Sustainability Action Plan. Our programmes specialise in learning for sustainability, climate education and learning outdoors. Embedded in all our programmes are literacy, numeracy and STEM. We are especially proud of the emphasis our programmes place on pupil voice, with many opportunities for pupils to take the lead and create change themselves. Our flagship programme is our Eco Schools programme, which is the largest sustainable education programme in the world. Nearly 1,000 schools in Scotland currently take part in Eco Schools. By following the 7 elements, schools and nurseries can become more environmentally friendly. We offer lots of support for helping you in your Eco Schools journeys. We have workshops for educators, workshops for pupils, and we also have Q&A sessions. We also have a Train the Trainer programme, which is a 4-week online programme. We have regular courses taking place throughout the year if you'd like to get involved and learn how you can run climate-ready classrooms in your own secondary school. This year we've also introduced a brand new climate emergency training course, SCQF Level 4. This is aimed at secondary school pupils looking to develop their knowledge of climate change and understand what positive decisions they can take to address the causes of climate change. If you're interested in this course, please get in touch with Josh Cannell at the address below.
Emma Reynolds, who is going to show us her new book, and she's going to talk about how the young people in the world are making change happen and how change and building a better future starts with us. I have to say, Emma, I have a copy of your book and it is beautiful and I am really enjoying reading it. So I'm really excited about what you have to tell us today. So I am going to stop sharing these and I'm going to let you tell us all about Young Activists.
Amazing. Thank you so much. It's such a pleasure to be here. Thank you so much for having me. So I'm just going to share my screen. Bear with me. It's doing it. Yeah, it's doing it the proper way. That's what we like. Okay, cool. So can everyone see that? Just give me I can't see the chat, so you have to give me a verbal
That's
yes.
great. That's worked.
Awesome.
Yay.
Hooray. Thank you. It takes a while to warm up. So yeah, hello everybody. My name is Emma Reynolds. I'm an author and illustrator from Manchester, and I'm beaming in today on the internet to say hello to you all and tell you all about how your voice is powerful and about my book. So I'm going to give you a little bit of an intro. I'm going to tell you more about the Youth Climate Activists. I'm going to tell you where do you start, because it can feel quite overwhelming, and explain how good things are happening. So I'm going to start with telling you how powerful your voice is. So how does our book begin? So Drawn to Change the World starts by explaining the science. So you guys probably already know the main, like we talked about before, the main reason why the Earth is heating too quickly is because of the release of fossil fuels, which is trapping the heat in and heating our world too quickly. But it's also really important to remember that it's also about the destruction of nature. And we humans are part of nature. We are nature. We rely on it completely to survive. It's our food, it's our air, it's our water. So as well as the release of fossil fuels that we need to bring down massively and stop, we also need to be protecting and restoring nature. So who is mainly responsible? This is also a really important thing to remember. So the richest 10%, which is definitely not me or anyone here, unless you're a secret billionaire. So the richest 10% are responsible for 50% of emissions, which is absolutely huge. But the poorest 50% of the world are only responsible for 10%. So the people who are least responsible are also the people who are being affected the most. So people in countries in the global south, which isn't geographically the south, but is lower income countries, they are affected the most, but they release the least, which is super unfair. So the solution is already out there and is quite simple. We need to stop using fossil fuels immediately and protect and restore nature as fast as we can. Indigenous people, they know this. They have been protecting the world for forever. They are the original people in those places. So they only make up less than 5% of the global population now, but they still protect over 80% of the world's biodiversity. And that's why it was so important for me to start my book with these Indigenous activists, because it didn't start with Greta Thunberg, who's the most famous probably, but Indigenous people, Indigenous youth, Indigenous elders, they have been protecting and fighting for our environment for decades, absolutely since forever. So it's really important that we support them. So Takata Ionai says 80% of the world's remaining biodiversity is in Indigenous lands. And that's because we've not allowed our lands and our sacred homelands to be desecrated or exploited in the name of economic progress. So just really important to remember that we humans are part of nature, we're not separate from it, and Indigenous people need to be at the centre of decision making, and they're not at the moment. So the first bio in the book is Autumn Peltier, and she is a water protector in Canada, and she's really upset when she was little to find that one of the reservations had boil advisories on their toilet door, which means you have to boil all the water before you're even allowed to drink it, and you can't even wash your hands in it because it's been contaminated by these oil pipelines. So oil is a type of fossil fuel, and these companies deliberately choose to build these oil pipelines through Indigenous lands instead of around white areas. And this is
White areas. Yeah. There's a wee common theme as this video goes on. I'm choosing not really to speak too much. But I'm not going to play all of this. There's a few other clips I'll play after this, but you'll start to see what I'm sort of referring to at present. White areas. So not just areas that aren't indigenous, not white areas. Yeah. Standard practice, because what you'll come to find, if you're not already aware, a lot of these people like herself there who peddle this climate nonsense to children, or just in general, they just come from the exact same family of people who perpetuate the same BS, aka social justice, progressivism, etc. And it always seems to centre around being anti-white in nature. Feminism is anti-white male, critical race theory, obviously anti-white male. LGBT activists tend to have a hatred for straight white men. This is no different. Climate justice, the climate narrative itself is centered around white nations, white men in particular.
is also fighting against pipelines. So again, these companies choose to build it through Indigenous lands, through their water, kind of skirting around the white communities and deliberately choosing to build it through Indigenous people's lands, which again seems really unfair because they're bearing the brunt of
they're
these
doing it on
hazards.
purpose,
And both of these things are examples of environmental racism.
And there it is, environmental racism, where through intentional, systemic design, Indigenous, black and brown communities bear the brunt of environmental hazards, such as leaking oil pipelines and polluting factories. So straight away, you're already presented with what could only really be described as critical race theory in nature, in some respects. You've excluded whites and you've lumped absolutely every other category of people into the one bracket: the oppressed, the marginalised, the victims, which, by extension, in turn, indicates and implies that white people are responsible. It's fucking. I'm sick of this shit. And again, it's the fact that they're going after the youth with this. There was, as like I read it earlier on, 2,000 plus children were watching this nonsense. And how much of this sort of information have they had spoon fed to them prior to them sitting down to listen to her? This is the sort of narratives that are presented. These are the modern day narratives that are the facts, as that feature at the start said. Wow.
So I know it's very heavy for a Monday morning, but it's super important that we realise that this is happening. So it's through intentional design. Indigenous, Black, Brown communities, they're all bearing the brunt of these environmental hazards, such as leaking oil pipelines and polluting factories. So Daphne Frias is an incredible activist from the US. She lives in, she's from Harlem, which is in New York, and she has cerebral palsy and uses a wheelchair. And she talks about how disabled people are also bearing more brunt of the climate crisis because, for example, if there's bad air and they have asthma, that affects their ability to be able to breathe. So she talks about the intersections and how important it is to support people who, in a climate crisis, for example, if there's a flood, they can't leave because they can't charge their wheelchair and things like that. So that's also really important. And sometimes
Absolute nonsense. Again, natural disasters. It's in the name. Natural disasters. Disasters that occur. Floods occur. Hurricanes occur. Storms occur. Earthquakes occur, etc., etc., etc. But it's all climate crisis related now. And we have to think of all the poor victims and their circumstances. Everybody is affected in any of the aforementioned circumstances. Some will be more affected than others, but we don't need to politicize that concept and that fact. And that's exactly what's happening here. I present to you intersectionality.
so Daphne also, there's obviously a lot of gun violence in America, and Daphne talks about how all of these things are related. So she says it's super important to remember that the systems that led us to the climate crisis and to gun violence are the exact same systems, because the same communities that are disproportionately affected by one are disproportionately affected by the other. So all of these oppressive systems are linked. So communities that are already marginalized in society, for example, Indigenous people, like I mentioned, Black people, people of color, disabled people, homeless people, LGBTQIA people, all these people who are already marginalized are the most impacted by the climate and nature crisis.
This is the facts that the teacher spoke about at the start, apparently. Right. So, same communities that are affected by the climate crisis are more likely to be the same communities that are affected by gun violence. Because the same communities that are disproportionately affected by one are disproportionately affected by the other. And this is all down to oppressive systems. And they're all linked because communities that are already marginalized in society are not impacted by the climate and nature crisis. Really now. Really now. Oh, God.
So a global issue that you might care about is plastic waste, intensive farming, environmental racism like we talked about before, and the global south being worse affected. Or you could do something like your favorite animal. Are they endangered? Is their habitat threatened? And you could focus on that, kind of like I did with the bats. So the most important thing is to work in community. We can't do this alone. You'll burn out. It's too much for one person. So you must work together. That's the most important thing to remember. And absolutely everyone is needed. Did you know that bad news sells more newspapers and gets more clicks? So this is by design. This means they make more money from adverts in the paper and online. So if you think there's only bad news, this is why, because people are more likely to pick up a newspaper or click on something online if it's shocking. So this leads to something called doomism, which also makes people feel hopeless and want to give up. And if we fall into doomism and thinking, oh, there's nothing I can do, what's the point? This just allows these harmful systems like capitalism, environmental racism, etc., which is run by the same powerful billionaires causing the crisis, it just allows it to carry on as it is. But we need to change that.
So, of course, there's them sneaking in capitals in there. Not the first time you'll see that, and sure as hell not the first time I've seen it either. But environmental racism again. I love this. So the way that she's trying to frame this is that doom makes people feel hopeless and want to give up. And according to her, it's the rich, capitalist billionaires who profit from all of the misery that we're seeing right now in regards to, pillaging all the resources and creating the climate change. They provide all the doom because they control the narratives, they control the papers, etc. And they do this deliberately to ensure that people don't rise up. How very convenient. Nah, maybe I'm just a little bit too autistic for my own goods. But I can kind of see through this, really. And what I mean by that is, it almost sounds to me as if this is presented so that the youth get bombarded with doom. Don't worry, folks. That doom is supposed to keep you down. But we can do something about it, because your voice matters. So all of this doom that you've just been presented with and probably bombarded with for years, why don't you channel that energy into rising up? You can do something about it. So, wow. Talk about shooting yourself in the foot there, Mr. Powerful Billionaires. Surely the powerful billionaires would want to keep their business ventures going unabated, and therefore surely they wouldn't provide everybody with so much doom if it was really the case. Surely not. But, it's just a bit odd, is it not? Surely they would be providing narratives that would tell you that everything's hunky-dory. Hmm. Hmm. Yeah.
I'm just going to end with this quote. It is the goal of oppressive systems to make us feel hopeless, to take away our joy and steal our imagination. Imagination is such a powerful tool. It's not childish or irrelevant. It is actually one of our greatest solutions to imagining a more sustainable, equitable future. So a fairer future. Thank you so much for listening. And I've been told you can send your questions to me and I will reply by email. We have about 6 minutes if you did want to ask me any more questions now. I'm happy to answer them if we have
No,
time.
you are all right,
I'll
lass.
pass it back.
And this is the end product, I suppose. Primary 4. 2045. Climate Action Week. People love Jasper from the Wildlife Park. Oh, lovely. Oh, yeah. We took part in Lesson 4, Our Future World. Mrs. Steele, I mean, at the end of the day, just to sort of conclude this video, I do realise it's kind of got a bit long. This is a political ideology. Now, whether or not you're of the belief that there is genuinely a quote-unquote crisis out there or not is somewhat irrelevant, because what is happening here is that the crisis, or crisis in air quotes, is being blurred, it's being made synonymous with politics, because there is people who have ulterior motives. They're trying to propagandize and politicize in order to exploit what they claim is a crisis. So on the other side of this crisis, once we've beaten it, and according to them, we will have a fairer, greener, more equitable, more sustainable world. And then you just need to start to look into what sustainable developments entails, what global citizenship entails, especially in an educational context. And you slowly start to see that there's something very sinister going on here. But it's always dressed up so matter-of-factly, it's simply all about saving the world from an impending doom.